This is your boy Jeff here to tell you about my brand new tarot game app, which you can download for free from the Play Store by simply typing in Handmade Tarot Game. And you can see it right here on my home screen. It's this little hand that's doing the mudra, the Gyan mudra, the OK mudra, which we'll explain later. Okay, so you just click it. It fires pretty much up right away, and that's because there's only the bare essentials for what you need: an intro, the learning of the whole book I wrote, which is broken up into chapters, and then the play function of the game. Now, you're probably wondering, what is this tarot game? Well, I'll show you. You can see it right here. This is the whole map of what I have made of the tarot, and you can see it uses hand gestures and elements to define the 22 major arcana of the tarot. Now, arcana really just refers to like archetype. These are hidden forces within the psyche. They're unconscious forces that everyone has some kind of relationship with, because these are like universal parts of our experience. Many people have different names for these, and the tarot gives you the most like eloquent definitions of these, because it breaks up each of the archetypes into its numerological component and ties them to the rest with zodiac correspondences, as well as an overarching like imagery journey that you go through as you learn these 22 archetypes. And these are basically like letters that you should learn. They're so easy to do once you just get the hang of them. You spend a little bit of time memorizing one or two a day, and you will have this whole system down in no time, and hopefully you'll be as quick as I am with it. I've made this system to help people raise their consciousness, which really means speed up their consciousness so that they can work with these archetypes rather than against them. Because if they're not made conscious, these unconscious archetypes may come into your life, and you may call them fate, but really they're coming from you. So there's a lot of examples here that we can go into, but I think I want to start with the Hanged Man. It's archetype number 12 here on the left. It's the hanged loose hand gesture. Okay, here he is, the Hanged Man card. Okay, so this card is the 12th card of the deck. It's 1, 2, and that numerology principle will give us the overall formula for understanding this card, because it's basically the one energy being unified with the two energy. And that's why the Hanged Man is suspended, because he is basically a connecting principle between the two others, which you can see here on the cross, which is a horizontal plane with a vertical plane. And the Hanged Man is emulating this, so he's kind of showing that the correspondences are mirrored within our own body, and in order to discover these, you have to do what the Hanged Man does, which is hang loose. Now, you click the button on the bottom here, this arrow sends you into my chapter, which I open with this very interesting quote I have from Jesus, which is basically the very definition of the Hanged Man, which I'll show you later. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang, notice that word hang, all the law and the prophets. So this is very crucial for the tarot, because the card before this is justice, the 11th card, that is the law, and now we have the Hanged Man being hung from the beam, and this is his way of showing that he is the prophet. Now, why is he being hung? Well, I believe it's because the Hanged Man represents the upside down truths of life. The paradoxes, that something that's the opposite of truth is also a form of truth, because anything that's exactly opposite of something else will lead you to that something else. And this is what Freud talks about in his dream interpretation work, where he would tell you that the messages from the unconscious are forms of untruth, because you don't get clear conscious messages from the unconscious. You get messages that are cloaked in a metaphor, something that's just slightly off. It could be very obvious once you know that clue. So the Hanged Man represents this fundamental reversal in the psyche. And to understand the need for this reversal, we basically have to go to understanding who the Hanged Man really is. The Hanged Man is basically like Odin, the god who's been hanged on the tree. It's also Jesus, who's been hanged on a cross. It's also Osiris, who was basically hung out to dry as he was shipped down the river in a sarcophagus. I mean, these are all gods who kind of went through a deep underworld experience that they must go through in order to achieve their mission. Okay. And the reason why they have to do this is because if you're God, you can't just relate with the world from the most high place. You actually have to do it from the very lowest place. Because if you do it from any kind of place of authority, you're basically denying mankind's free will. And that's basically counter to the whole mission of what the universe is set up for. So God has to enter the world through these kind of like murdered archetypes. The God is dead, and it's basically it's basically the substrate from which the ego consciousness emerges. We're basically draining the unconscious of its primal forces as our ego grows. Now, the Hanged Man card, you can see over here, he's actually a water card. He's wearing a blue shirt, and he's suspended upside down like a teardrop or like a waterfall. Okay, and this is because he shows the essential motion of the water element, which is what he represents in our tarot game. You see this hand gesture here, it's surrounded in blue. You can look at the middle mandala here. The blue tab says water. And then that shows that all the blue hand gestures, starting with the priestess up top, all the way down to the moon here, are blue water archetypes. So they beat all the fire archetypes, and they're beat by the air archetypes, which we can explain in so many beautiful ways because the system is like infinitely coherent. I know I'm saying I make this up, but this was really given to me. So I'll go on, and I hope that you'll see what I mean when I finally explain to you what the principle of water means for the Hanged Man. Okay, so for this element, each chapter is broken up into an archetype explanation and the element explanation. Okay, so here I give you the water correspondence, and here it is. Pisces, a mutable water sign, is the Hanged Man's corresponding zodiac sign. So what this means is that every single tarot card has some kind of astrological correspondence to it. There are 22 major arcana, and these arcana correspond to the 12 zodiac signs and then 10 other planetary principles that are brought in, like Venus and the moon and Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter, and so on. So you put them all together, and basically these are the images of the astrology. What everyone's doing with astrology, if you're not learning the tarot, you're not doing your most effective research here, because this gives you the literal image of that like astrological archetype, and then gives it to you in the numerology format, which then lets you process it within the context of the other archetypes. And this is crucial for your development because the numbers are progressive. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And if you know the order, you know how these archetypes progress from one to the other. And this is essential for whenever you're confronting an archetype, so that you can move forward or backwards along the axis of this, what we call the Fool's Journey. The Fool is the first card of the tarot. Most people will know it from playing card decks, where he makes a surprise appearance as the Jester, the Joker card. Okay, they're the same archetype. And that's how powerful that one is. You get it even in playing cards. So everyone already has some acquaintance with the Fool energy. It's basically what the Joker is for life. Okay, so you can figure that one out. It's pretty cool. So as I was saying, the Hanged Man is a water sign because he corresponds to Pisces in the astrology chart. Pisces is the two fish that circle each other over and over again. And they represent the Alpha and the Omega because they are the last sign in the zodiac. Okay, so what does this mean for Jesus? Okay, Jesus is the Piscean avatar. That's because he was born right as the age of Pisces was cusping. This is not like some new age garble. The age of Pisces literally refers to an astronomical, not astrological, event as the Earth's axis tilts in its 23-degree wobble towards Pisces. Okay, so that Pisces sign is the 12th sign in the zodiac, and it's basically the closeout of the entire zodiac, because once we get to the sign after Pisces, if you know what I'm talking about, Pisces is in February, then it's March, and that's Aries. And Aries is the birth of the new year. This is also something we learn from the tarot, that the real meaning of the new year is spring. It's not the cold, barren time of winter when everything is dead. That's like a false teaching, I'm pretty sure, because if you set your life up with the bursting of spring as the calendar clock, you get to move forward with the new year, with all of nature together, which just makes so much more sense. And the fact that we don't know this is actually being hidden to us by the holiday of April Fool's Day, because the Fool is the first card of the zodiac, that April 1st card. And that happens right in the first 10 days of Aries. Okay, getting out of hand here, but what I'm really trying to do here is emphasize that Pisces is the last archetype. Aries is the first. Okay, so remember the image of the two fish swimming around one another. They are chasing each other's tails, essentially closing the gap between the first and the last. Okay, so now watch what this means for Jesus Christ. According to Christianity, in order for everyone to have eternal life, Jesus had to shed his blood and even water when he was stabbed on the side. That's called expiation. And this is actually one of the most original formulas for alchemy. This is the solve et coagula. It's Latin for something like you have to dissolve something down in order to form the philosopher's stone, which is the, stone of immortality. It's, even if it doesn't give you mortal life, it lets you learn about the fact that you are already immortal because you are a part of this eternal universe that we are all in. Okay. And so going on, what does this mean for Jesus's teachings? Okay. He sheds his blood. And what this means is Jesus was an advocate of dissolution. Okay. When I talk about dissolving, he pretty much came it here with his mission to dissolve all previous structures of society. And look at the Sermon on the Mount. He says, "Blessed are the poor in the spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven," as well as "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me." Okay, so these are mystifying teachings that are basically impossible to understand from the egoic mindset. The only way to understand these teachings is with the idea that they are meant to dissolve your ego so that you can realize the inner teaching of Pisces, that there is no separation between the first and the last, between the self and the other. Okay, so that's the only way that you can love the neighbor as yourself, because if you have any differentiation between yourself and your neighbor, there will be different types of love going on there. That's just natural. But the Hanged Man teaches that there is a perspective at card number 12 between the fixed space of identity, the one showing the identity there, which is the magician in the tarot, and the opposites, the high priestess in the tarot, who stands between the two pillars of spirit and matter. Okay? So this teaches you that if you are really trying to love your neighbor as yourself, you basically have to see your neighbor as yourself. And that's a pretty tall order, which is why I don't think most Christians are actually living up to that, because it calls for an extreme renunciation of pretty much everything that is, associated with like a traditional society. It's telling you love. And love is basically apocalyptic. It's an unveiling of the true reality. And when we finally come to learn what that means, then we'll be living in the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so now we're going to get to the hand gesture associated with the Hanged Man. Here it is, the hanged loose gesture over here on the left. Clicking it again, moving through my chapter. Okay, so I'll read to you what I gave for the hand gesture. When we are mindful that our individuality, number one, exists in the space between extremes, number two, we become as still, serene, and as surrendered as the Hanged Man in the tarot. What am I saying? I'm saying when there are these apparent dualistic conflicts in life, between what I want and what I don't want, we're always being propelled by these things, but somehow we're still above them. We're still watching them. That's because they don't overcome us. We're still like the witness of them. Okay. So for this reason, the signature gesture of the Hanged Man is the surfer sign hang loose. Okay, hang loose is a hand phrase that loosely translates to surfs up, a gesture for when the waves rise and it's time to go with the flow. As a water card, the fixed position of the Hanged Man is something of a riddle until we realize that the Hanged Man is bound to change. Life's constant. Okay, that's a double entendre. He is literally brought to the acceptance of life's eternal truth that everything is change, which is a paradox. Though it is paradoxical, by surrendering to the rhythm of the ocean, a surfer may actually gain control over their craft. Okay, so like so much in life, it all comes down to your attitude. Do you want to hang tight or hang loose through your life? Hang tight implies an acute and constricted waiting for something to happen. Meanwhile, hang loose seems to imply relax, enjoy yourself, discover your own path, or you be you. Even better, the combination of hanging and looseness implies the delicate balance between suspense, the hanging, and openness, the looseness, hang loose. These are the ingredients that are required for life's greatest experiences. Okay, so when you can have your attention like focus, but at the same time, you're not judging where it's going to go, that will lead you to the mystical revelations of the hanged man. Okay, and this hangman archetype is not all there is. I talked a lot about the dissolution of the self. Meanwhile, the tarot is a map for selfhood, which is the building of the self. Because although you are connected with your eternal self, the self that you have in this lifetime is built up through your experiences and your choices, which is something that a lot of spiritual paths don't quite describe well enough. They think that all can be forgiveness, whereas you're in a relationship with yourself along this path, and so the decisions you make matter very, very much. Windows can open and doors can open and they can close, depending on how you behave in what I call moments of choice. These are key parts, key turning points in your life, whether or not you're going to do what the hanged man does and go with the flow, or whether you're going to kind of go back to what you're comfortable and familiar with, where things are, seemingly ordered, which they're not, because everything in life is change. So this gives you the philosophical substrate to move with that change, because that's what the hanged man teaches you to go with the flow, because the flow is really a unified principle that's connected between the extremes of the upper and the lower. That's where the water flows. It flows downwards, and we see this in the glyph of water in the very center of the mandala, which is the downward pointing arrow right underneath the word water, right here in the center, that downward pointing arrow. And it's counter to the fire, which is an ascending principle. So when people are fired up, it implies a raising of consciousness, and that's good too. But what the hanged man teaches us is that sometimes it's necessary to purge your consciousness so that you can go to the deeper levels of where the emotions are, because that's what the water represents, is the emotions. Okay, so these are the principles of the hanged man. I think it's pretty epic because every single one of these gestures is equally philosophic, equally inspired, and synchronistic. Okay, these gestures came to me and I worked them out, and I gave solid proofs for what they represent, and hopefully a manageable size. I'd like to write more about them, but instead I made it shorter so that people can get through them. Sometimes the way the app was designed, it's a little bit hard to read. Sometimes autocorrect took over when it was being put into an app. So there's also my book, which you can buy on Amazon. And if you like this video, you can subscribe to me and you can hit the bell, and I will give you more updates on these other archetypes. I'm going to work my way through this whole map here so you can learn every archetype. And in the meanwhile, why don't you just practice doing the hanged man archetype? Just look at this archetype and make the hand gesture, okay? And then just really think about it, going with the flow. The literal hand gesture is the shape of the two, the one and the two, the extremes, the mammoth thumb, which represents your will, and then the pinky, which can represent, well, technically it represents communication in palmistry, but at the same time, in our context, it really represents the smaller side of yourself, okay? It's because that's the smallest finger. So it can represent that kind of side of your shadow. The contra position of the thumb, the willpower of your whole being, because the thumb is what grasps life, and then the pinky, which is like a kind of hidden director behind the scenes. And so you can make this gesture and actually tap into, I believe, a deeper understanding of the hanged man. Okay, so very fun. Again, like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Please post your comments and questions below, and I will try and get back to them because I'm very passionate about this. And remember, this is all free. So have fun with it, and goodbye.